Good morning, everybody. My name is Mamoru Watanabe from Tokyo Workers, and I would like to touch upon the Japanese market. Probably, I would like to spend 4 or 5 minutes in order to introduce Japan, and I also would like to place a set of recommendations for the audience today. Now, would you please open the first page? I mean, I haven't been able to open the file yet, but probably the first page is your Japanese national flag, which is very simple, red and white. And the second page, please. I do remember that that displays the size of the Japanese market. According to my experience in supporting many European companies in order to meet the challenges in the Japanese market, it's been very important for those market participants to understand the nature of the Japanese market. And first of all, I would like to emphasize the importance of 3 things. When we look at the size of the Japanese market, it's a pretty sizable market. However, many European companies, encompassing British, French, Italian, German, Belgian, even companies from Holland, they've been meeting challenges in the Japanese market without preparing themselves in terms of 3 very important factors. The first recommendation that I have is that I would like them, or I would like those companies who are interested in entering into the Japanese market, I would like them to have a very realistic strategy. The second item is efforts in thorough and appropriate communications with the Japanese prospective customers and partners. 3, consistent and sustainable commitment to the market itself. In many cases, and many entities from EU think, and they actually tell me that Japanese market is not open. In some aspects, I agree with them, especially when they meet some challenges in terms of trying to understand and interpret the content of the contract with Japanese companies. Some items are very difficult to understand. It is very easy for me as a Japanese to understand the content and intentions of each item. However, for those who are coming into the Japanese market, sometimes it is very difficult. And in that sense, I do recommend that thorough and appropriate communications in order to remove all kinds of questions and uncertainties before entering into any kind of contract or any kind of even agreement, including NDA, non-disclosure agreement. There are some cases I have experienced that European companies have encountered some difficulties or troublesome situations simply because the Japanese companies and the European companies did not reach a common understanding about the nature and the contents of NDA. So those are the 3 points I would like to emphasize, and I would like to send you as a set of recommendations let me just repeat. One, realistic strategy. Second, thorough and appropriate communications with prospective customers and partners. Three, consistent and sustainable commitment to the Japanese market. I would like you to open the second page. Having said that, promising industrial for European companies, I do believe that there are many Japanese companies in these areas who have been trying to develop and strengthen the relationships with European companies. I have even now, I've been talking with, or I have been supporting Japanese telecommunications carriers who are very much interested in developing and strengthening relationships with telecommunications carriers in Europe, in the EU. For example, one specific area that they have been very much interested in is telematics for automobile manufacturers in Europe. I'm not only talking about either German or French or Italian automobile manufacturers. I'm also referring to Japanese automobile manufacturers who are operating in the EU market. And talking about optical fibers and other very high-tech industries, the situation is very similar. So not only optical fibers alone as independent products, they have been used in automobiles, for example. So very clear and realistic applications, if you have, it will be much easier for you to draw a very realistic strategy. Now, would you please open the third page? Now, let me just touch upon some aspects of the cultural differences. Many companies from EU countries do emphasize cultural differences. I usually explain thoroughly cultural commonalities also. I'm not simply talking about both ends of the earth. I'm only talking about two aspects, or how to look at those issues. The first one is the formality. Well, I personally do not think the Japanese cultural characteristics about formality is no different from that you have in the European countries. Everybody is very formal and polite in the EU when we do business in the European countries. And as long as you practice the same pose in the Japanese market, when you plan to enter into the Japanese market, I personally do not have any fear or worry or even the subtle complex feelings. The second item is, let's say, what literally means harmony in the Japanese language. Harmony, that means many Japanese people in general, with some exceptional ones, they do appreciate harmony, or I would say the most important factor in this particular concept is acquaintance. When you get acquainted with Japanese companies. They would like to, they, meaning the Japanese companies, do appreciate your intention in order to maintain the acquaintance, the relationship, the distance between you and the Japanese companies. So harmony is very important. However, there's one specific warning I have. There are several cases I have experienced in which many Japanese people said very ambiguous opinions. For example, if you ask a question, how about this proposal? Or how about this opinion? In some cases, Japanese people responded back to those EU companies. It would be pretty difficult, period. In the Japanese linguistic culture, in some cases, it is very difficult, meaning they would stop considering the next steps. However, as long as Japanese people appreciate what or harmony and not creating any subtle or hostile situations, they do not say, no, we cannot do that. Instead of saying that, they have a tendency to respond back to them. It would be pretty difficult, or it would be very difficult. They would not add any other qualifying statement, such as, it would be very difficult because such and such. So there are some linguistic characteristics which we have to pay attention to, or I would like you to pay attention to. However, in many cases, as long as you try to clarify what their actual intentions are, you would not be able to, you would not create any unqualified situation. Now, the third item, hierarchy. This is, in many enterprises in Japan right now, especially in high-tech and modernized industries, such as ICT, AI, and even some manufacturing industry companies, hierarchy is not so much appreciated anymore. In many Japanese companies, the labor contracts have been revised, and then those companies are trying to develop new schemes in order to better treat employees, partners, and customers. So that hierarchy, in some cases, you have to pay attention to. However, not in all cases. So, before finishing up my explanation, I would like to re-emphasize a set of 3 recommendations. When you consider entering into the Japanese market, I would like you to prepare a realistic strategy. 1. 2. Thorough and appropriate communication as your attitude. 3. Consistent and sustainable commitment to the Japanese market or challenges you meet in the Japanese market. Thank you very much, and I will wait for your comments and questions later. Thank you.
Besides the website on which you'll find all of the information on the Overseas Trade Fair programs, there is, of course, our Twitter account, our LinkedIn group, but most importantly, I think our email help desk account at which you can ask any question.